Nickelodeon has been going viral for all the wrong reasons since the release of the docu-series Quiet on Set: The Dark Side of Kids TV. Released in 2 parts on March 17th, the documentary takes viewers behind the scenes of Nickelodeon's golden age, unveiling the allegedly toxic and abusive environment some of the era's biggest child stars say were cultivated behind the scenes by showrunner Dan Schneider and other adults on set. And one of the most talked about and shocking stories revealed in the documentary is that of Drake Bell, former star of the popular show Drake and Josh. In the 3rd part of the series, Bell details alleged sexual abuse he says he suffered at the hands of Brian Peck, a dialogue coach working with Nickelodeon at the time. Peck started his career in the 1980s, starring in small roles in movies like X-Men, Holes, Return of the Living Dead, and more. He would then go on later to be a dialogue coach for many Nickelodeon and Disney shows such as Sweet Life on Deck, The Amanda Show, Keenan and Kel, and much more. Drake Bell started his career when he was only 5 years old. His dad saw Drake's love for movies and film, so when going through a magazine, he saw an ad for Kids Hollywood Connection and signed Drake up for it. He would then start out by doing commercials and eventually did some guest spots in the late 90s on shows like Home Improvement and Seinfeld. During this time, Drake and his dad became really close. Drake's dad was his manager and would drive him to auditions every day after school. In 1999, right after doing an audition, Dan Schneider, one of the biggest producers of Nickelodeon, comes up to Drake and says Amanda wants you on the show. He ends up getting the role and said that he had a really fun time filming the first season, but that is until Nickelodeon on Sunset. In 2000, Nickelodeon moved their studios from Paramount to Nickelodeon on Sunset, where they would kick off the 2nd season of The Amanda Bynes Show. This is also when Brian Peck would start working as dialogue coach for the show. Drake met Brian Peck the first day of the 2nd season when they did a table read. Everyone seemed to like Peck and Drake had a lot of common interests with him. They both had a shared love of the history of Hollywood, and Drake really liked how knowledgeable and experienced Peck was in the industry. He also worked with many famous actors as a coach and convinced Drake and his dad for him to give Drake acting lessons at his house. At the time, Drake said that he enjoyed going to Peck's house. He would have parties, and all their parents were there, and there was a bunch of Hollywood memorabilia. Just a really nice house to be in. Because of their same interests and how much time they've been spending together, Drake and Brian get pretty close, which Drake's dad was getting a little suspicious about. He started touching Drake's arms and waist, putting his hand around him, and even popping into Drake's dressing rooms, trying to help him get dressed. There's even a video of Leonardo DiCaprio and Brian where he touches DiCaprio the same way that he allegedly touched Drake. Drake's dad would try to talk to other people on set about how Peck was acting, but most people would just brush it off and even ostracize him because Peck was openly gay and people thought Drake's dad was just homophobic. In 2000, while filming for The Amanda Show, one of the writers proposed Drake Bell and Josh be the stars of their new buddy comedy, which would be now known as Drake and Josh. But at this point, Brian had already had his hooks in Drake, and he would start to integrate into his life, go to all of Drake's concerts, even tell Drake's dad that he shouldn't be his manager. By the time 2001 rolls around, Drake is about to turn 15, and Brian suggests for him to have his party at Peck's home. He convinces him that his place would be the best option, and Drake could even put on a concert for all his friends. So that's what they did, and while at the party, Drake's dad finds a bunch of birthday cards from Brian Peck and his friends with inappropriate and adult descriptions on them. After seeing this, Drake's dad gets really concerned and starts to keep Drake as far away as possible from Brian. But Brian, of course, didn't like this, so he really starts to drive a wedge between Drake and his dad, saying that he's stealing Drake's money, nobody likes him on set, Drake's career won't move forward with him there, and Drake ends up believing Brian. And he knew that Drake's mom and dad didn't have a good relationship, so he starts telling Drake's mom the same things that he's telling Drake. Eventually, Drake says that he doesn't want his dad to be his manager anymore, and his mom starts to manage his career. But this is what Brian wanted. He starts to put himself in the position of what Drake's dad used to do his whole life. Drake's mom didn't really like to drive to LA from Orange County, so Brian would come pick him up for auditions and even have Drake spend the night, telling him it would be better than driving and getting him home at midnight. And one day, when Drake was sleeping on the couch like he normally does, he opens his eyes to see Brian assaulting him. This would be the first time of multiple times that Brian would assault Drake. According to him, it just got worse and worse, and because of the circumstances and how well connected Peck was in the industry, it was something Drake kept a secret from everyone for a while. Drake even got a girlfriend at the time and spent so much time there that the girlfriend's mom noticed and took Drake to the therapist, where he basically just brushed off the situation. Brian Peck had complete control over Drake. If he said anything to anyone, it could mean the end of his career. Peck even tried to get Drake to convince Dan Schneider to cast Brian as the dad on Drake and Josh. But eventually there came a day where Drake just had enough and exploded to his mom about everything that was going on. They immediately called the cops and an investigation was started. The police used a recording device on Drake's phone and had him call Brian, where he would eventually confess to all the crimes he committed against Drake. And finally, in August of 2003, Brian Peck was arrested. When he was arrested, Drake's dad didn't even know that Brian was arrested for the things that he did to Drake, just that he was arrested. He found out much later. In October of 2004, Peck's sentencing happened, and during court, Brian's entire side was full of people supporting him, while Drake only had his brother and his mom. The support Brian got from the Hollywood industry was astounding. During the case, friends and relatives of Brian were allowed to give letters of support to the judge to appeal to his character and ask for a lighter sentence. Brian had over 41 letters of support for him, and many of them were actors and people in the Hollywood industry, including James Marsden, Alan Thicke, Ron Melendez, Ryder Strong, Will Friedle, and many more. Many of the letters used almost the exact same language, saying that for Brian to have done this, there must have been some extreme circumstance or extreme temptation from Drake. Many of the letters also asked the judge to give Brian Peck probation instead of actual time. At the end of court, Brian pled no contest to 2 counts of child abuse and charged to 16 months in jail, as well as registered into the sex offender database. And you would probably think this would be the last time Brian would be able to work on kids' TV shows again. Well, you would be incorrect. Ridge Carell, the director of The Amanda Bynes Show, and Beth Carell, the stage director, both said in an interview that it would be a pleasure to work with Peck again. And they end up doing exactly that on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. Brian would continue to be able to work in the industry until 2019 when he just stopped. As for Drake, he released a second album right after Drake and Josh and also did a few movies. Bell would go on to have issues with substance addiction and even lost his house in bankruptcy. Later, he ends up getting a DUI as well as pleading guilty to child endangerment charges when he was sending inappropriate messages to a minor. Nothing was physical, and he was sentenced to 2 years probation and 200 hours of community service. After a long journey of abuse and recovering from it, Drake was able to get professional help after hitting rock bottom, where he was able to go through trauma as well as grief therapy. He now lives in Mexico and makes Spanish music. During the case of Drake's abuse, he was a minor, so he was referred to as John Doe. His name only came out recently with the release of the documentary Quiet on Set. And with that release, we have been able to find out the truth and dark side of kids' TV. Brian Peck was only one of 3 people tied to abuse at Nickelodeon. If you like this video, please comment below if you'd like me to do a story on the other 2, or any other people or cases you'd like to see. Thanks for watching.